This evening, today is April the 7th, at 7:35 p.m. Pacific time, we have a full moon in the sign of Libra. So this full moon is on April the 7th in the United States, April the 8th in many parts of the world where this video is going to be viewed. And I don't know if it's going to be April the 6th for anyone, but 7th to 8th. If it is April the 6th for you when this happens, do leave a comment and let me know so that I can be educated accordingly. We're gonna expand on this full moon. The last few videos I've been doing on lunations, new moons and full moons, I really liked what I've been doing with them, and it feels like I am on the nose with it much more. So I'm going to continue to use that spirit of philosophy, and we're going to gradually expand the scope of the interpretation of it. The first thing, which a lot of people have heard me say before when it comes to new moons and full moons, but full moons in particular, is that a full moon represents a time when the wave that started at the time of the new moon 14 days ago crashes to the shore. So it's things coming to a head. Now they can come to a head positively. There can be exposure. People can be pushed into the limelight. Full moon is a giant spotlight. It is a super moon. It is, as a physical distance between the moon and the earth is at its shortest. So the moon should appear bigger than it normally does, or at its biggest. I leave it to you to determine what sort of an effect a supermoon has. In my experience, a full moon is a full moon, and I haven't measured the intensity of a supermoon as opposed to a micromoon and all that kind of good stuff. So we leave that there. I leave it to you to determine if this feels like it has more potent of an impact than other full moons. Things can come to a head. You can be pushed into a limelight. A contract can be presented to you, signed. Offers can be made. Interviews or sales can come to some sort of a completion or conclusion. Decisions can get made. It can mark an end to indecisiveness. On the more challenging side, it can mean that emotions come to a head in some way. So either something gets completed, a decision gets made, something positive happens, something that you've been working towards gets done, a project gets completed, something reaches culmination, or emotionally something reaches a breaking point for either you or someone else around you. And with full moons, there is this kind of fluidic component to it, an increase in the presence of tears, a tantrum, an emotional overwhelmedness, the pot boiling over. That's the analogy I use the most. Something becomes visible, something becomes clear. So whether you're on the receiving end of someone else's meltdown or you're having a meltdown yourself, the question is, what is it really revealing? Because the actual event of the meltdown itself might be quite lunar, it might be quite emotional, but the question is, what is it that needs to be given a voice? What hidden truth is being revealed? The disk of the moon is now revealed, and what has come to some sort of an emotional overwhelm. Now, the nature of the overwhelm, the sign in which the moon is in, can have an impact on that. So this particular full moon may not be, it's not an Aries full moon, it's not a fire sign full moon. So for some people, anger and tantrums could very much be part of this, but this is actually a kind of a gloriously peaceable, peace-loving full moon. So is it a quiet release of emotions? Is it an understanding? Is it a personal understanding? If there are tears involved, does it come with some sort of realization? Is it much more personal? Is it much more internal? We'll delve into that as this goes on. You can determine how that's impacting you. The full moon is also most felt 48 hours before, maybe 72 hours before the momentum gathers, but 48 hours before the full moon and 24 hours later. So whatever subtle but unmistakable thing, if it is subtle with a full moon, unmistakable thing that the full moon is bringing to you, or bringing to some sort of a culmination, or bringing to some sort of a head, will announce itself, will identify itself, within 24 hours of a full moon or 48 hours before, in terms of what's coming to a head. Now let's start to interpret this in a deeper manner. This is a full moon in Libra, and so it happens. This is a partnership full moon. It is a marriage full moon. It is a contractual full moon. It is a legal full moon. It involves you and the other party. And in Libra, the sun is in the sign of Aries, and the new moon we had was in the sign of Aries, which is really a sign of identity and articulating in an unembarrassed way who we are and what we want. Aries is a sign of pursuit. This full moon, however, is not a full moon of pursuit. It is a full moon of receptivity. It is a full moon of flow. It is a full moon of natural flow, of allowing a certain amount of peace and balance and charm and negotiation and understanding and extending the hand to someone else and shaking it. It has that kind of a feeling to it. Now, it could have a legal component to it, and not all the energies of this full moon. In many ways, this is a charming full moon. Charm is a word that's often associated with the planet Venus, and because the full moon is in the sign of Libra, Venus rules this full moon. In many ways, it's a charming full moon, but it's not without its not a time. It's not as if the illumination is without its emphasis on either deception or loss, or indeed some of the more martial, warlike, transformative events that we're seeing go on right now in terms of health and the virus. So let's continue to expand on that. It could be, as I said, at its most core level, a full moon of partnership, whatever that means, whatever's revealed, whatever's understood, whatever the decision making is. And marriage features strongly in the sign of Libra is a sign of marriage and contracts and agreements and you and the other person. But it's not you and another person having fun. It's not you and your kids. It's not you and your parents necessarily. It's you and that other person who look at each other and articulate a contract, whether it's verbal or whether it is written. Sometimes contracts are verbal. Hey, I'll meet you at such and such place at such and such time is a contract. We treat certain contracts with greater stringency and if it's written and has a signature on it, and others are treated with more lightness and casually, as if they can be broken. And somewhere in this whole thing is with Libra and the scales and justice to some extent, there is a weighing up and down and a balancing and a Libra is an air sign. It is a cardinal sign. It is a mental sign. It's funny, we attribute a lot of emotional balancing qualities to Libra, but the balance supposedly doesn't come from an emotional place. It comes from a mental place. It comes from a place of judiciousness. It comes from a place of ease. It comes from a place of balance. It comes from a place of, this is a dispassionate full moon, if there is such a thing. With Libra, it comes from a more dispassionate place. Now, people who have heard me talk about the sign of Libra have heard me be amused about how it is that a sign that is so often associated with peacefulness and charm, people who have strong Libra placements, can also be extraordinarily stubborn, extraordinarily self-willed, and extraordinarily my way or the highway. It's all just they sort of talk about the velvet glove that masks the iron hand underneath it. So I take it as, if you know people, let's just keep talking about the characteristics of the sign of Libra and the full moon. Now, ultimately, Libra, the question of marriage and partnerships becomes interesting, relevant during this time, and contracts. Something coming to a culmination, something coming to a light, something emotional about them, a need to balance things, decision-making around them. It's a conversational full moon in some ways. And ultimately, if I were to look at this, I would say that somewhere in the middle of this is a desire to be in communication with someone. Is it to clear the air? Is it to agree on certain things? Is it to reestablish contact? Is it to put things in writing? Is it to, what is that about? Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is in the sign of Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So somewhere, communication, contracts, sales, resumes, teaching, listening, talking, social media, vehicles, cars, commuting short, regular distances. Not many of us are commuting short, regular distances right now. So a full moon sort of in response to that is an interesting full moon. Feeling cooped in, perhaps, and that kind of bringing certain things to a head, or deciding to go take a walk. Opportunities, financial and relationship, may come from Geminian things. So talking, communicating, social media, learning, skill acquisition, I've already said talking, I'll say talking again, speaking, interviewing, selling, presenting, listening, colleagues, your immediate environment, siblings, cousins, relatives, cars, vehicles, commutes, neighbors, neighborhoods, all of these very Geminian data, information gathering, sharing and taking information, feedback, sharing and taking in feedback, processing things in a mental way. Opportunities, financial and relationship, can come around this full moon through these kinds of Geminian things. Venus is now in a social place. So the idea of reaching out to people getting in touch with you, something coming to a head there or getting exposed there could be strongly featured. Now, when we look at Venus in Gemini, we've talked about the planet and its placement that is actually affecting and ruling this full moon. But when you look at overall disposition in a chart, how the chart is disposed, Venus is in Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is in Pisces. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. Neptune is in its own sign of Pisces, so Neptune is strong. So one dispositor of this chart is Neptune. Okay, we've got Neptune identified. We're going to come to this in a second, in Pisces. When we look at Jupiter, Jupiter is in the sign of Capricorn, that is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is in the sign of Aquarius, which is ruled by Saturn and Uranus. Saturn, therefore, is in its own sign of Aquarius. So we've got two dispositors identified, Neptune and Saturn. Saturn is in Aquarius, you're ruled by Uranus. Uranus is in Taurus, ruled by Venus, and we're back to Venus again. So Venus, surprisingly powerfully placed at the time of this full moon as the ruler of this full moon, but also being one of three planets that disposits itself, that has reign over the chart. Venus, Neptune, Saturn. There's an opportunity with this full moon to either decide to talk about certain things or be in communication about some things, or talk it out. Pick up the phone. If you're living with someone and something needs to be discussed, communication is featured very, very strongly. And this communication can be around discipline, boundaries, patterns, laying strong foundations for something that can be built in the future. It can be communication around deception and cloudy, murky things and loss, or things that have a kind of a smoke and mirrors quality to it. It can be communication about artistic inspiration or spiritual inspiration, transcendence. It can be communication around helping humanity in measurable ways. So when we look at Neptune, the first of the dispositors that is in the sign of Pisces, we've already spent a little bit of time. Mercury is here. Mercury was retrograde in Pisces. It is now direct. Mercury was retrograde February 17th to about March the 10th. It is now direct, and it's going to remain here till April the 10th. One of the important things that is operating currently in the chart is in the sign of Pisces, where we had crises in 2015, 2016, last Mercury retrograde, last year 2019 in March and April, and then this year in February, March, and even into April. And there's a need communication-wise to take action by May the 4th in this part of the chart. And as I've already discussed before, three things could be present wherever Pisces sits in your chart. A sense of loss, letting go, transcendence, and often this loss can be caused by someone else's deceit, but ultimately the loss is about understanding and realizing that those things that we are attached to, or things that we think define us, the universe is trying to tell us that, nothing really belongs to you in a certain sense. Neptune is the anti-matter, anti-attachment. I've really tried to search for a word, and I think that, transcendence and bliss and letting go, it's I think you get the feeling, a connection to spirit, a connection to oneness, and an awareness that we are part of that oneness, and that the material reality is really, really kind of a dream. So whatever loss is being brought up, whatever needs to be released, whatever needs to be let go of, and unfortunately when things have to be let go of in the physical plane, often it can mean that someone has to take something from you. So that's where this kind of smoke and mirrors quality, a feeling that even if you were to put up a fight or you try to put up a fight, but something just keeps getting further and further away from you. That's very Neptunian. Smoke and mirrors, someone trying to prank you, someone trying to be a bit of a narcissist in terms of throwing up a fog or, fear, obligation, guilt, these kinds of narcissistic tendencies that we all use sometimes when we are misbehaving. So somewhere that planet is operating, and that is operating at the time of this full moon. So when we look at communication and partnership, there could be an opportunity to talk certain things out and to discuss these aspects. Saturn in Aquarius is about helping humanity through scientific means. It's hard for me to not think about medication, medicines, healing, testing of the virus. So somewhere communication around impacting and in very real, strong, permanent terms, trying to help humanity comes to mind. Discipline and rigor around friendships and social networks and mentors and colleagues, the groups that we're in part of. Somewhere with Saturn, there's a sense of responsibility. Not surprising that it's coming at a time of distancing. Some people call it social distancing. I've started to hear the term physical distancing because socially there's still a requirement for us to be involved. I prefer physical distancing as opposed to social distancing, but I know why social distancing was used. But at the same time, there's a dual. Saturn is both restricting us and making sure that we have appropriate boundaries so that we are being responsible in the way that we show up in groups of people, making sure that we have the right boundaries when it comes to groups of people, friends, etc., and also trying to implement tools and healing solutions that are measurable and often scientific. And then, of course, we have the final dispositor, the planet dispositing Venus itself, along with Neptune and Saturn, which is Venus. So relationships and harmony and natural flow and opportunity and financial flow, the results of nature and spirit doing its work to kind of produce bounty and a sense of abundance, either through relationships and relational harmony or through money. The interplay and relationship between our finances and the health and strength of our relationships and our networks. This is why I kind of feel like this is, well, not kind of feel like, I feel like this is a full moon of communication. And you may decide around this full moon to have a conversation about something that may follow in the next few days, 2 or 3 days, 4 days, within a week. Or you may decide somewhere that to have the conversation today as the full moon comes up. So just have that awareness that some sort of a culmination, trying to clear the air, trying to bring things to light, conversation may occur around some of the topics that I brought up, however it applies to you. The moon is ultimately happy and peaceful in Libra, but right after the full moon, within a little over 12 hours after the full moon, within 12 hours of the full moon, the moon squares this very tense part of the chart that a lot of Western astrologers feel is defining the coronavirus pandemic. It squares it. It creates tension, something that needs to be solved and sorted through. So somewhere this peaceful, diplomatic, communication-oriented full moon is going to challenge this transformation and combat and restriction that has been going through. It could be that something comes to a head in a clean manner that challenges a certain amount of corruption. It could be that a certain amount of healing is required and there's some breakthroughs that come to it, maybe in a Libran in a more quiet way that we hear about later, that came about at this time when it comes to things like testing and medication that occurs as a result of this full moon, or around the time of this full moon. There's also somewhere a rebellious fight and a struggle between forces of diplomacy and kindness and decency and charm and peace and harmony and more warlike aspects. This whole coronavirus, these coronavirus planets are conjunct Pallas Athena. And Pallas, I haven't talked about this because I want to avoid kind of conspiracy theories around something we really don't know very much about. But Pallas Athena encourages fighting in strategic ways. So the Trojan horse is very much, Pallas Athena, when you're fighting, comes through and secretly whispers in your ear as to how to take someone down. And often it is through deceitful means, through the idea that all is fair in love and war, particularly when you are fighting a worthy opponent. Indeed, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's remarkable how many times Krishna, the preserver, an incarnation of Vishnu, God, really comes in and encourages the good side, the Pandavas, to fight below the belt and to hit below the belt, encouraging an absence of nobility, an absence of nobility in warfare to take the other party down, because that feels like it's the right thing to do. And this idea of something being planted or being fought or being in shady ways with an ulterior motive. I haven't, my last video was really trying to summarize my thoughts on the astrology of the coronavirus as it sort of propagated, and to look and see whether we're really going to be, by May and especially June, start to see things, with this last lunar, 2 weeks ago, the Aries new moon conjunct Chiron, so introducing healing but also accelerating some of the darkness and accelerating the wound. And then this next new moon at the end of this month in the sign of Taurus conjunct Uranus, epiphany and innovation and whether these lunations can really start to make a bit of a difference and insert rays of hope and get the clouds to move over us as we head to the end of May maybe, or even into June. Or whether this is something we're living with in some ways till November, indeed even December of this year, and maybe a combination of both. But what I neglected to mention yesterday, or 2 days ago, but what I will mention today, because of the square that happens after the moon is full with these planets of constriction, is that they are conjunct Pallas Athena. So the idea or the notion that somewhere, however things are being handled, whether it is in the virus itself, whether it is in the planting of the virus, whether it is who gets help where and how, something about it is not clean. Something about it is not clean. Something about it may be planted, maybe strategic, may have a war. There may be an element of taking someone or something down that is part and parcel of whatever it is that we're dealing with here. Okay, let's bring this home. Ultimately, as full moons go, this is a much desired and cherished full moon of harmony and balance. It is a kinder, mellower full moon than normal. It is a relationship-oriented full moon, whether that is marriage. And by marriage, I mean committed partnerships. I'm not talking about dating. I'm talking about if you're living with someone, if you're sharing finances with someone, contracts, legal affairs. Ultimately, it is a moon of fairness and harmony. So be careful what you do around this time. If you're doing things that are surreptitious, don't underestimate the sign of Libra and a Libra full moon to ultimately deliver something to you karmically if you are not being clean about something. And this is where this kind of full moon square to Pallas Athena and Jupiter and Pluto and then Mars and Saturn is so fascinating. But as we head into the full moon, there may be a desire or need or something is identified that a conversation or communication about something might help alleviate lack of clarity around something murky that concerns loss and transcendence in some way, or inspiration, or the arts, or artistic inspiration, or spirituality and connection to spirit in a much sort of bigger, holistic, blissful, cleaner way. There could be, as we head to this full moon, culminations around things related to helping humanity in scientific and measurable ways, or boundaries related to friends, friendships, and belonging in groups. Physical, but also emotional may come up. And finally, whether you make the decision to talk to a person or persons around this full moon, whether you choose to have it, the conversation or the written communication is close by. Teaching, skill acquisition, social media, communication are all featured parts of this full moon. And once the full moon is over, and as we head into what is here, the wee hours of the morning and the evening in places like India, I'm thinking about the two geographies where my videos are watched most. Something about this full moon, as peaceful as it might be, challenges or comes to a head with the more conservative and intense fighting forces that are trying to create some sort of a revolution in their own way, or transformation or new beginning in the sign of Capricorn. And right now, those forces are very much keeping the forest fire going to elicit or create the new beginning by the end of the year. But there's something about this full moon that challenges that. Is it social? Is it political? Again, there's an air of rebellion around things. And it could be featured as far as this full moon is concerned. Some sort of news item breaks, or social media or communication again could be featured. Okay, we'll leave it at that. I think that's a 25-minute analysis of this full moon, and there's enough here for each of us to kind of try and determine. On a personal level, often things that come up can be subtle but unmistakable. A sale comes through, a contract comes through, something about contracts and sales, something about marriage, something about a communication needing to happen somewhere. That's likely how most of us are going to feel it on a more personal level. Boundaries, the air needs to be cleared somewhere. Could be emotional, but with the Libra full moon ruled by Venus and Gemini, and ultimately disposited by Venus along with Neptune and Saturn. I think it's a conversation about murky things, smoke and mirrors things, or hidden things for a lot of people, related to friends, related to groups, related to contract, that essentially this full moon creates either a portal for a decision to have this conversation or the conversation itself. You can see the light is all over the place. It's been a relatively beautiful day in Los Angeles after it's been raining. It's going to rain again. I will leave it at this. If you found this video useful and helpful, please feel free to share it, subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button to be notified. And if you click on the bell icon, I think there's different options. So there's one which has like these little parentheses around them. If you click on that, you'll get notified whenever I do new videos. Feel free to like the video if you liked it, comment on it. The likes and comments just kind of help give it more circulation. My contact information is in the subject area. I have finally started to catch up on my email, so thank you for people's patience on this. You're welcome to use that email to contact me if you're interested in a reading and want to find out rates about it, or want me to make an easy to read version of your chart that will tell you which signs fall in which houses and what those houses stand for, so that you don't have to. You can get a chart for free online, but then you will need to interpret all the symbols and all the glyphs and get a sense of it, blah blah blah. All right, I'm going to leave it at this, and I will be back in touch soon whenever I'm inspired to do another video. I hope you all can enjoy. I hope that for many of us there's a bit of a moment of peace and restoration and respite with this full moon, although the social quality of it is not going to be far behind. All right, thank you.